World building in IDW is great and a welcome thing, but it's so clear that it's such an afterthought, and even calling it a thought is being generous to the IDW team. There are cities as large as LA, San Francisco, and New York filled with people. It just further proves Sonic Force's problem that there is not one single competent character in this entire universe if they aren't Sonic the Hedgehog himself. There are 3 sprawling cities sitting right across the dirt roads of these other primitive medieval and old western grade villages. It's like we have a bunch of people who are still stuck in the 1800s, living only 3 miles away from a bunch of people who have evolved into modern day society and have been living that way for multiple decades. You know what? No. They have been living this way for centuries now, if I'm not being egregiously charitable about this.
Eggman Empire. Authorization approved. Access granted.
What is happening, offenders? My name is KotyTang. We're traveling through the IDW comics at an okay pace, but before continuing on our grand venture into the next saga, we can't move on without checking in on the annual 2020 comic. We have 6 stories to get through this week, with 6 different writers taking the reins of each. This video should be more like just a casual jog. There shouldn't be too much going on in these comics, right? Chapter 1. We follow Big the Cat on his journey to find Froggy. This serves as a creative way to recap the last 2 sagas, ending just before Tango gets corrupted, and explaining how Big got mixed up in the Metal Virus. So let's enjoy the tale of Big the Cat. Big's Big Adventure by Ian Flynn. Big searched for Froggy, though it may be his folly. From Vista View to a crab defeated by 2. From village to town, Froggy still wasn't found. There were 2 bouts between hedgehogs, not an army of frogs. Through Eggman bases to resistance places, where ancient energy would flow to the sea down below. Big could not find his friend, but that's not where his journey would end. He returned to many towns and found a trio of clowns. He searched through the snow and found an old foe. He returned to the warmth and stayed out of the north. Through a mine called Echo, not one single hello. The world became scary and a lot less hairy. Nobody was home, and Big felt alone. He did find Amy, but left before things got zany. Big fished in a pond, and who would respond? Why, his good friend Froggy, who was a bit soggy. Then out came some foes that threatened to impose. The 2 slipped from those who tried to enclose. But Big felt strange, and for this exchange, he gave up his will, and the 2 sat there until... I actually find it pretty funny how Big just randomly shows up in the Metal Virus Saga. It never really occurred to me that he just came from completely out of nowhere. Imagine for a moment, not really being too into Sonic, and then this random ass cat just pops in, and everybody acts like this character has always been there. Something interesting about this chapter is that it shows Jewel running from Zombots with a bunch of kids. It's a story that we won't be seeing the last of, as we'll be reading through the beginning of it in the final chapter of this annual comic. However, this scene with Jewel specifically actually could not have happened. I'll touch more on that when we get to the chapter with Jewel. Chapter 2. The Darkest Hour by Evan Stanley. We switch gears to Sunset City before the Zombot apocalypse took over. We follow radio host Night the Owl, turning into his radio station to drift everybody off into the night. Now, Night runs Sunset City's #1 station for news and advice, so he's going to be taking callers after every song, or during every song. It's not very clear how long this song was supposed to be, because within 3 panels, he's stopping the song to take a caller, I guess? The first caller is a distressed woman, who immediately sets a tone of desperation, claiming that she's being followed by a group of people. Some people that look sick. The caller is attacked, and the line clicks off. Another caller jumps on in a panic, and another, and another. Night's janitor, Don, decides that he's not sticking around to wait for whatever's killing people to come and get them. so he dips out the radio station. Knight gets a call from somebody in the Restoration claiming that he's the only person left to get word out about the metal virus. As Knight debates on whether or not he's able to spread the word, Don comes back with supplies, reconsidering his decision to ditch Knight, and instead he encourages Knight to stay on the radio station and spread the word, to which they'll be joining each other to partake in the horrors that will soon befall Sunset City. I like this story. It's very simple, yet it tells a cute story between two dudes working at a small radio station, trying to send the word out about how the entire world will be crumbling down soon. It's heartfelt. I really like how there's so much characterization put into this short story. There's plenty to digest, and we learn everything about these characters in such a small amount of time. Even Don ends up being a multi-layered character, as he doubles back on whether or not he should leave Knight all by himself. World building in IDW is great, and a welcome thing, but it's so clear that it's such an afterthought, and even calling it a thought is being generous to the IDW team, because there's no possible way that any amount of effort was put into how any of this would work. And it's so evident to see from the very beginning of this entire comic. This isn't necessarily a fault on this short specifically. What I'm talking about is a fault that has happened specifically due to the writing in the Metal Virus Saga as a whole. There are 3 sprawling cities sitting right across the dirt roads of these other primitive medieval and old western grade villages. There's entire police forces, SWAT teams, militaries. Somebody called this radio station with what had to be a cell phone since they were in the middle of being followed. This region has all of the technology from at least the 21st century. We even have a technologically advanced military level organization that's made up of people from all over these different cities, towns, and villages. There would be mayors, gangs, multiple radio stations, multiple TV stations, multiple news stations, celebrities, politicians, schools, infrastructure, power companies, factories, and so much more. None of it adds up. IDW is failing at providing the most basic world building. The most basic world building is when you just copy and paste our exact society. All IDW did was make it so that everybody was an animal instead of a human. With the skyrocketing population for this region, as we've been consistently confirming throughout the Metal Virus Saga, it just further proves Sonic Force's problem that there is not one single competent character in this entire universe if they aren't Sonic the Hedgehog himself. What we can confirm through the IDW series is that somehow all the citizens are the most competent people in the world when it comes to simply just existing and living off of nothing, as they go on to create skyscrapers, clothing, and cars with no materials, because all of these things had to have just spawned out of thin air, because where would they be getting all of these materials from? According to these 3 cities, everybody is isolated from themselves. Nobody interacts with one another. They all exist entirely independent of each other, so they would all have to be getting their resources from what's around them. What's around them just happens to be every other town, village, and city though. I guess we could easily just confirm that they steal resources from each other because there are no roads that connect any town to a city, or city to city, or city to village, or town to village. When you first pick up this comic, the world building is vastly different than what we've been provided while reading through the Metal Virus Saga. In the Neo Metal Saga, it shows that all of these little towns and villages are scattered far out from each other, and there are only a handful of animal people that have been creating their towns and villages for several to maybe a few dozen years in this region. There are no cities or modern day issues to worry about in this region, so of course, Sonic and his friends, being the ones who help all of these mostly defenseless people, who have so far only decided to turn a few forests and flatlands around into different communities. The reason they would be defenseless Makes sense. Throughout the Sonic series, it's pretty much been confirmed that humans live in cities. So when we first read through IDW, it makes sense that all the animal people all live in towns and villages isolated from everybody else, and there are occasionally animal people that will move to the city, such as Rouge and Amy. So the resistance is made up of people from these villages who stepped up to the plate and had no other option. Nobody else was going to protect them except for each other. Now we jump to the issues with the cities full of animal people, and the questions start to pop up. There are cities as large as LA, San Francisco, and New York filled with people. There's culture, infrastructure, laws, rules, and so much more. So now we compare what we were just confirmed with into the world building that we had been previously using. Cream living in a village in the forest is now just weird. These people living in random places and growing like a medieval society is weird. The fact that nobody has cars outside of the city is weird. The fact that there are no roads and highways outside of the cities is weird. The fact that Night the Owl is apparently the only radio station in this entire region, and it's not even confirmed if anybody from outside of Sunset City can even freely tap into this radio station, is yet again weird. It's like we have a bunch of people who are still stuck in the 1800s, living only 3 miles away from a bunch of people who have evolved into modern day society and have been living that way for multiple decades. You know what? No. They have been living this way for centuries now, if I'm not being egregiously charitable about this. This is simply not how the evolution of society would go if we were at the point that we have modern day New York City and modern day Los Angeles, of which are somehow an eyeshot of a primitive village. These people have military grade trucks and arsenal. Where are the military bases at? These cities would have power lines, sewage, mass construction, millions of people crammed into 3 cities. It's as though everybody outside of the city were a bunch of homeless people who got pushed out of these cities. Who is providing these cities with the materials to grow? These people in these villages would be killing to have jobs in these cities. They would need trucks to transport goods. They need roads and highways to get these goods to people. They need construction zones that you can't just freely walk in. Lumber areas, junkyards, excavation sites. The isolation and extreme differences between every town and city is just unreal. The world of Sonic used to have a president as well, and the dude lived by Central City, if not right inside of Central City. They don't have a president anymore? Is this place just also called Central City? Because last time I recall, that's where all the humans were. Which has been confirmed and a consistent thing in this universe since Sonic Adventure 2. So is this like a Central City that's called Central City where only animals live? So who is running this entire region? Do they all just make up their own laws? Are there any shared laws? Do these cities even trade with each other? Do these villages trade with each other? Do the cities? Where are the farmers providing food to these millions of people living inside of all these cities? How were these cities dealing with Eggman's army just walking around freely when Metal Sonic was posing as Eggman? As IDW grows bigger, I can go on and on about this. And you know what? I just might. It's so clear that IDW never thought about how this world would work. So my assumption is, the further I get into this, the more this world is going to break, and the more that first saga will make absolutely no sense. As it stands right now with just these 2 sagas, the world building in the IDW universe is absolutely abysmal and follows next to no logic at all. Chapter 3. Coming at us with a shot of visual storytelling. Pretty brave for a comic, but a neat idea for a short story. This is Reflections by Caleb Gollner. Metal Sonic strides down the hallways of his creator's base until his attention is caught by the replay of his fight against Sonic and Silver at Frozen Peak. His failure on replay, displaying his shame to any who happen to walk along these walls. Once again, he has been defeated by him, by his copy. Metal Sonic hunches over, clutching his fist, his anger bubbling. He heads straight for Dr. Starline's lab. He stands in the doorway for a moment, staring at the Metal Virus's liquid. Once, twice, he looks into the reflection, viewing the perfect image of himself. His eyes shift to the nearby monitor, and he sees him once more. Sonic the Hedgehog, the person Metal Sonic claims to be. Sonic's expression twists to horror as the Metal Virus slowly begins taking him over. The recording dances across Metal Sonic's eyes. His intense stare leads to a thought. Metal Sonic looks back. Again, the Metal Virus, the same liquid that threatens to overtake Sonic for the crime of being alive. Metal Sonic moves toward the Metal Virus's liquid. He reaches out, but he hesitates and pulls back his hand. He's afraid, but he shouldn't be. Or should he be? The Metal Virus shouldn't harm him. But he's real. He is the real Sonic. If Sonic is infected, then won't he be? Metal Sonic, filled with determination. He must prove something to himself. He takes this leap of faith, but still so cautiously. A single finger, carefully placed into the pool. He brings it out. It settles for a moment. He must know. He must see the results. He's gone this far. Will it overtake him? Will he be cursed with the same fate as his other? No. Metal Sonic watches as the liquid slips between the metal plating on his finger, returning back into the pool of liquid. It plops, distorting the once clear image of Metal Sonic. Every other time he saw the liquid, he saw himself, clearly, without fault. But now, the pool that showed his image was tainted and spoiled. No longer recognizable. He's distorted. The screen flashes white. Emptiness. The world is crumbling. Had he a heart, it would be racing. Pure realization of denial. He is made of metal. The virus can't harm him. Unlike Sonic, the one he calls the copy. Metal Sonic is not made of flesh. He's immune to the virus. But Sonic isn't. Metal was crafted, created to be a response to Sonic. Fine. So what? But he's better, right? Is this good? Is this bad? Does this make him superior? Does this make him weaker? What does it mean for Metal Sonic to be—
How doth?
Starline interrupts, catching Metal Sonic in his lab, demanding him to leave, comparing him to a zombie shambling about in his lab, as he's ordered to remove himself from Dr. Starline's presence, to take orders from somebody. One last panel, as though looking into a doorway to another dimension, another ending. Sonic infected by the Metal Virus, and what the virus could potentially make him, a robot. Sonic is surrounded by the world, being attacked by metal, while Metal Sonic is already encased, trapped in the metal all around him. Metal Sonic has the superhero problem that Marvel doesn't understand how to solve for some reason. See, Metal Sonic's emotions cannot be displayed properly through his face. He's basically wearing a mask, so you have to really focus on the visuals of what he's doing. Through the camera work, the lighting, his posture, and so many other minor details, we can fully tell what he's thinking and how he's feeling. Even if some of it is left up to personal interpretation, we understand the grand idea of this chapter. It's a sort of realization for Metal Sonic. It's a shame that this story will go nowhere, because Metal Sonic will just go back to being evil Sonic. The one that thinks he's the real Sonic, who happens to be made of metal. Every single story that could even potentially lead to mass amounts of character development will always lead to nowhere and be reset upon turning the page. That's the upsetting reality about IDW. Chapter 4. Eggman's Day Off by Sarah Grayley. As Dr. Starline watches the fruits of Eggman's labor, and also Eggman himself, he notices Eggman is completely freaking out. so he flies himself into the portal, landing himself in Eggman's top secret egg cave. It's a place inside of what I assume to be Eggman's main base that houses all manner of Eggman's memorabilia that's kind of set up like a cute little arts and crafts station. It even has Sonic the Hedgehog action figures. I guess we're trying to show that Eggman is really just a big old kid at heart, which is probably why he wants to make a theme park. Look, that's fair. Even evil masterminds need hobbies, right? Oh, well, his hobbies also include pretending to fight Sonic and still losing. Eggman shows off some of his other toys, which happen to be robot versions of all his enemies. Starline examines the various metal Sonics along the wall of the egg cave until he comes across one toy in particular. The only toy of Starline, and it's him as a robot. To which Eggman shoves him out of the room, demanding that he never return again without knocking first. Well, let's get into the mind of Dr. Starline for this little bit here, okay? All of these little toys of Sonic and his friends, and the only one of Dr. Starline that Eggman has is a robot version of Starline. I'd imagine that would be such a chilling thing for Starline to witness. He's already doing every single thing that Eggman says, and that still wasn't enough. I mean, just the beginning of this chapter, bro was at his beck and call because Eggman got angry, flying through a portal to see what's wrong with the doctor. Eggman truly doesn't appreciate anything. Dr. Starline should probably realize that by now. He should probably be entirely against everything Eggman stands for at this point. Or maybe he finds it compelling? He's really just that much of an Eggman fanboy? Chapter 5. Flock Together by Sam King. We follow the Chaotix on their search for Charmy and any survivors left after the recent devastation of the Metal Virus. Without any Charmy in sight, Vector gets impatient, especially at Espio's optimism in the situation. Luckily, a migration of Zombot Flickies happens to be housing Charmy, allowing Vector and Espio to reunite with him after a struggle that eventually leads to the Zombot Charmy being placed in a capsule thanks to Espio's smoke bombs scattering the herd, allowing Vector to quickly think up a way to put Charmy in the capsule. Cool. I mean, the fact that they found Charmy just flying about in the sky with a bunch of flickies, yeah, f***ing right. But it's definitely something that happened, so, neat. No, wait, hold up! Hold everything! You can't be serious right now. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you've been enjoying the video, and if you'd be so kind, be sure to leave a comment about what you think about the annual comic. I'd love to have a conversation with all of my lovely viewers, so don't be shy, let's have a dialogue about Sonic the Hedgehog. Now on to the last chapter. Chapter 6. The Catalyst by Gigi Dutria. In Spiral Hill, we follow the soon-to-be leader of the Restoration, Jewel the Beetle, in her first ever solo adventure. Let's see how she deals with this situation. So, the Sonic Fan Club's self-proclaimed president has lost his friends, so he comes running into town asking for Tangle to help them. However, he gets none other than Jewel. The tiny president informs Jewel that a giant spaceship was spewing out a bunch of gunk. He's referring to the face ship, correct? The giant spaceship that everybody would have seen? Somehow, it went entirely unnoticed. Okay. Jewel informs him that Tangle isn't there right now, which makes the young president sad. But Jewel offers to help in Tangle's place, as she's used to saving Tangle from trouble all the time. Okay, well, let's see how much I'll be able to believe that by the end of this story. The two head straight to Spiral Hill Farms. The Spiral Hill Farms, huh? Jewel and Kid President search around the farms until they hear a girl's voice in the distance, shouting for help. Upon arrival, we see that the Vice President is trapped on a pile of hay, surrounded by the Metal Virus. The Vice President claims that the face ship was nearby, spewing the stuff around. Again, the giant face ship that nobody saw but them. Okay. Jewel springs to action, and instead of flying over to the Vice President like she has been, she tries to walk over the Metal Virus. Because Jewel decided to walk over the metal virus, this gives President Child enough time to ignore Jewel's warning about the liquid, and he touches the metal virus, and now he's infected. Unfortunately for Jewel, it's a very common story trope for kids to just do things they shouldn't. That sucks to be Jewel, she just wanted to help everybody. So now the face ship is spewing its goo everywhere, forcing the three to race back to town. We even get to see the rest of the Sonic fan club, who had already long been infected at this point. Upon making it back to the village, we can see the face ship's sheer size in the distance. And, oh, let me tell you, it's not very stealthy for nobody to have seen this thing. Jewel realizes that she's been infected thanks to the kids. The townspeople now experience fear they've never known. Jewel touches the sides of her head and contacts Tangle for help, literally sealing Tangle's fate. And before you know it, all of Spiral Hill is taken by the virus. Well, in Jewel's first ever solo adventure, she fails and becomes infected by the metal virus. Am I just supposed to pretend that it's entirely possible that nobody saw or heard the face ship arrive? Because I don't. There's no possible way that this thing went unseen. And not only that, Eggman even entirely planned that the face ship wouldn't even show itself until it conveniently needed to, right when Jewel saves the kid. When Jewel first sees the vice president, it would have made a lot more sense for Jewel to fly over to get the kid. But okay, I guess. I can understand Jewel not being strong enough to carry both kids, but she can't even carry just one? If she can't even carry just one kid, Jewel is not beating the "she has never saved Tangle on an adventure before" allegations. So, remember how Spiral Hill had farms? Yeah, back to the world building topic. Am I to believe that Spiral Hill feeds this entire region single-handedly? Spiral Hill has to be swimming in cash. Even if every single person in the village worked on this farm, that would still not be enough to feed 3 fully stocked cities. Speaking of cities, to be honest, if Tangle wanted a change of scenery so much and was so bored of her home, as she claims when we got our solo stories with her, why didn't she just go down to her local city? I'm sure there's loads of things that Tangle has never experienced before, given how everything is set up. So, let's talk about how the metal virus works once again. Jewel actually should have been perfectly fine. This is yet another case of the metal virus just infecting somebody simply because they touched it, ignoring the context of what the character is wearing. In Jewel's case, her gloves should have nullified the virus and made it slide off of her. However, IDW also writes it so that Jewel touches her head for some reason. Listen, if I had like some ketchup or mayonnaise on my hand, the last thing I'm about to do is wipe it all over my face, bro. Who does that? Jewel, you a nasty bitch. Oh yeah, I also said that I would return to the scene from the first chapter. So this moment specifically with Jewel could not have happened because all 3 of them should have been infected by the metal virus. It was actually extremely important that the 3 were specifically infected at that point in the story. And if they were infected while running through the woods, there's no reason that Jewel would just magically appear back inside of her museum. As we've seen with every other Zombot, they don't maintain any of the thoughts that they had before they were infected. They just mindlessly go out and infect everything. Jewel would just be in the hordes of Zombots walking through the forest. And you could also add in the fact that Jewel called Tangle up to the village only to completely abandon the village entirely so that Tangle would arrive and never find her. All of this makes no sense as to how Tangle would have gotten infected, because why the hell would Jewel be back at her museum? So good job, Annual Comic. Luckily you retconned it with chapter 6, but this would have actually been a plot hole. Continuity, IDW, do you understand it? It's even funnier because Ian Flynn is the one who wrote that plot hole, while Gigi actually knew that Jewel had to be in the museum for Tangle to find her. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Okay, bye!